Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman, live from our Islamabad studios. Today, we'll be talking about the ongoing Indian atrocities in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We'll also be talking about the controversial tweet by the US State Department for SCA, and US must not ignore ground realities in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, stated by the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. And he further stated that we all have to sit down and find a way out. Now, talking about a few very important issues that we will be talking about in our today's program. US State Department's Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs issues a controversial tweet in which occupied Jammu and Kashmir was referred to as India's Jammu and Kashmir. It further states that I expect the new Biden administration that has always talked of fundamental human rights to stop ignoring the ground realities in held Kashmir. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. I want to be very clear. There has been no change in the US policy in the region, US State Department spokesperson Ned Price. Despite the clarification by the State Department spokesperson, the tweet is not corrected. We are disappointed to note the reference to Jammu and Kashmir in the US Department of State's tweet regarding the resumption of 4G mobile internet in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Foreign Office further says the reference is inconsistent with the disputed status of Jammu and Kashmir as recognized by the numerous United Nations Security Council resolutions and the international community, again stated by the Foreign Minister. And lastly, it says that Jammu and Kashmir is one of the oldest items on the agenda of the UNSC, which remains unresolved because of India's significance and unwillingness to implement the relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions and its own solemn commitments made to Pakistan, the Kashmiris and the international community, stated by the Foreign Office. And talking about a tweet, let me talk about that also. Official at the State Department account for the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs. It says, we welcome the resumption of 4G mobile internet in India's Jammu and Kashmir. This marks an important step for local residents, and we look forward to continued political and economic progress to restore normalcy in Jammu and Kashmir. This was stated by the State Department. So we'll be talking about that. Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Syed Muhammad Ali, Director Strategic Affairs, CASS. Thank you so much, Ali Saab, for your time. And on Skype, we'll be joined by Lord Nazir Ahmed. He's a member, House of Lords in UK. And we also have with us Abid Latif Sindhu Saab, Senior Analyst. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time as well. Now, Ali, when we hear, or rather when we read a tweet which says that we welcome the resumption of 4G mobile internet in India's Jammu and Kashmir, what exactly is this supposed to mean? Let's start off from this.
Thank you. I think this was a slip of the tongue. And it was timely
it wasn't
repaired.
corrected even after
yes,
the complaint
because when the spokesman was asked specifically that this tweet, does it reflect change or review in the US policy towards Kashmir or its stance, then there was a very well considered, unequivocal, unambiguous response that the US policy towards Kashmir has not changed. And that is exactly which has been recognized and appreciated by our Foreign Minister today. That thankfully this mistake was corrected.
They also clear what their current stance is.
Absolutely. So this is very important because as you rightly pointed out in the early part of your program, that our response was not just of dismay but disappointment, and it also reminded the US of its own international commitments regarding, as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, that these resolutions are there which consider Kashmir as the oldest outstanding agenda item on the UN agenda. So that is very important, and also its own stated position. So I think this was a timely correction of a hastily issued tweet, and which also reflects the vulnerability that social media has introduced an international diplomacy, which was very apparent in the time of the previous US administration, in which the State Department took a back seat, and Mr. Trump would tweet things not necessarily consistent with what the State Department was saying. And I think it is about time. This is a useful episode, actually, let me tell your audience.
And why is that so?
Because it will help State Department, which is beginning to revive its institutional approach towards statecraft and diplomacy,
Correct.
to repair its approach, which was absent under the Trump administration.
All right.
So you will see more well considered, well thought out statements. But what is
So you mean
a
that
welcome
when Pakistan
thing.
corrected them, that was the right way, right approach at the right time?
Actually, let me add another interesting aspect to it. If you follow that tweet, if you go to the State Department tweet, it immediately evoked huge international reactions from Pakistanis, from Kashmiris, from our diaspora, even from scholars and journalists, and immediately they were on the receiving end that this is a very irresponsible, unthought
Especially,
of
I mean, if they would
statement.
have, removed that word India, India's,
Yes.
Indian, that would have been a lot better, because that would be something that 4G internet has been resumed.
yes.
So that means that in Jammu and Kashmir,
Yes.
that would have been more appropriate.
Yes.
But the word India's, I mean, obviously there's
There
a
is
stance.
another quick.
And even Ali Saab, I would also try to mention something here, and that is about the map of India, because I believe, even because I'll just be very straight here, that I was teaching my son geography, and whenever I would Google the map of India, it was showing even Gilgit-Baltistan to be a part of India.
Yes.
And I think that is something very important, because we always show Jammu and Kashmir as a disputed territory.
Absolutely.
With a
because
different-
that position is in line with the
UN
United UN
yeah.
UN resolutions.
That's so
and very
correct.
quickly, just I want to add one more point. Because of the growing influence of the Indian diaspora within the US institutions, there is a possibility that some mid-career
Sir,
person
every
of Indian
second or
origin,
third person
yes,
is
yes.
of the Indian origin.
So that is something
whether
we
you talk
need
about
to
the
be
White
mindful
House
of.
or you talk about otherwise.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Obviously, they have their influence, and when you talk about these little commas and full stops,
Yes.
they matter, because they can change the entire course of the,
Position or
Ab-
stance.
Absolutely, absolutely. So coming to you, Lord Nazir, thank you so much once again for your time, and I know that you have a very busy schedule, but sir, your reaction and the reaction of the Kashmiris living in UK, for that matter, sir, when you read about this tweet, what exactly did you feel, and how did you respond to it? But let me put this same question to Sindhu Saab. Now, Sindhu Saab, we'll be getting back to Lord Nazir.
Can
I
you
think
hear me
there's
now?
some technical problem. Yeah, we can hear you now. So please go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Just like Pakistanis and Kashmiris around the world, they are very, very observant when something happens on Twitter or any of the social platforms, social media platforms. So people are concerned, but I think give them the benefit of doubt. This new administration will make mistakes. People find out once they're in the office that there are certain words and there are certain things that you do not say or do, because as far as we are concerned, it's Indian occupied Kashmir. And I know that there are people who refer it to Indian administered Kashmir. They could have used other words, but certainly to say Indian Kashmir obviously is offensive to Kashmiris as well as Pakistanis, and factually it's wrong as well. But I think your previous speaker was absolutely right. There are many Indians who have recently settled in the US, and they have very much influence, a lot of influence in the new administration, as well as in many institutions in the US. So I think we need to be very careful. We also need to empower our Pakistani and Kashmiri Americans. We also need to give them a lot of information. You see, here in the UK and in Europe, the Pakistani and Kashmiri community is very active. And anything that happens on Twitter or Facebook or even in Parliament, then people react. And if the Foreign Office or any of the ministers make mistake, then they're corrected. And soon you saw the leader of the Labour Party who wrongly said something, and then he had to retract and he had to change his views. So people, our communities need to be active. But I think now probably the diplomacy shouldn't be on Twitter, but we should see, or I hope to see, some diplomats and some politicians in Washington talking to the new administration, but also speaking at different think tanks, because it is important to go and speak at those think tanks. Just doing a Twitter diplomacy is not going to work, I'm afraid. So there, a lot of effort and a lot of hard work needs to be done.
I totally agree with you, sir. And definitely, I'm going to put a few questions regarding what the people, or especially the Kashmiris living in UK, what they are up to. But let me go to Sindhu Saab. Now, Sindhu Saab, when you hear, the State Department's tweet using such words, which reflect as if the Indians, they have this part as their integral, part of their country. But having said that, now when you look at what Pakistanis felt, or what the Kashmiris in fact went through after seeing this, because the kind of brutalities the Indian forces are committing there, use of pellet guns, and you name it, the imposition of these draconian laws out there, whether you talk about POTA or otherwise, that is something very important, because when you talk about the UN resolutions, you talk about that this is the stance of the international community regarding a certain issue or a problem or a piece of land for that matter, then the Americans should follow that. Why didn't they do it? Don't you think either they are following what the Indians are telling them to do, or perhaps they don't want to call it an occupied area, or they don't want to consider this as a disputed territory for that matter, sir?
Yeah, Faisal, it is very interesting phenomena, I think, which is coming up. Americans, US State Department is, I think, in my opinion, is trying to realign, realineate, and trying to readjust itself from all the past policies of the last administration. And, this tweet, I'll give the full benefit of doubt to the State Department, and especially to the South Asian Affair Department, which was actually, you must have remembered that during the time of Clinton, once Robin Raphael was heading this department, she tried a lot to make endeavors to bring both Pakistan and India at a position where they can address their issues. But as we would say that I have earlier said that I give the benefit of doubt. These diplomatic, these political punctuations, and these hyphens which are being created or being inserted by the Indian people, or Indian people of influence, who are now part of their think tanks, and who are now part of quite a few are now part of their administration also. So this will not, I think, in my opinion, it will not make much of an effort, because there are total of 18 UN resolutions which are passed on Security Council resolution, which are passed on Kashmir, and the most important was the 47, in resolution 47, in which it was stipulated that Kashmir is a disputed territory. It has to be resolved through a plebiscite, and the point of view of Pakistan was legitimized that it is the territory which people of the Kashmir has to decide to where they have to join, as the unfinished agenda of the partition. And moreover, once we say that the atrocities as you have mentioned, being committed by the Indian administration on in Kashmir over the innocent people, you can suppress the people physically, you can suppress people even politically, but it is very difficult that you can change the alignment, the ideology, the affiliations, the affinity which they have with their cause, and especially with Islam and with Pakistan. So I think these developments and this correction which they have, US State Department, is actually, I think this is a good thing which has happened. This will align a new this will align a new concept, and this will align a new policy for the US to pursue a balanced statecraft toward both India and Pakistan. You already know that while during their campaign, even Kamala Harris and even Biden, they all supported the people of Kashmir indirectly in subtlety. And even Biden
Not
has
supported the people of Kashmir, Sindhu Saab, I would say they supported the human rights cause primarily.
They supported
Because they never,
that's
in fact, took a stand for the Kashmiris, or never even tweeted about their problems, or never even, talked to the concerned authorities inside India.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I said insensitivity. They were supporting the human rights, the incarceration of the political leadership. They were supporting the killings. They were supporting the judicial killings in which through cordons and all that. So I think this insensitivity, this will bring the issue to the limelight, and this
Yeah.
is a good development indirectly.
All right. Now, Ali Sahib, one of our friend Anwar Iqbal Sahib, in fact, wrote a story in which he mentioned that no change in the US policy on Kashmir. So when they say no change, so what exactly was their previous policy if there is no change? Let's throw light on that.
Yes, very important question. Anwar Saab is a very dear friend. We were neighbors in Washington, actually. I think it's very important and timely clarification by the US State Department. And let me, for the benefit of your viewers, explain. When State Department issues a statement, it is not the government statement. It is not a party statement. It is the official statement or stance of the state of United States. So what does that mean? That means that Kashmir is a disputed territory. Why US has issued this statement? It is one factor is important, as
Is there
lots
any difference of opinion when it comes to United Nations? I'm talking about as of today,
Yeah.
of the United Nations and the United States. How do you-
Absolutely,
Because I
absolutely.
remember
Yes.
Donald Trump, when he was the president, he said, well, I'm going to cut the funds for United Nations, as if they were controlling it. They had that kind of a design that, if you will go against us or against our wishes or against any of the narratives which the United States of America has set, we know how to sort of challenge you and put you straight.
Yeah, that's very important, because that puts things in the context of the US
I remember
foreign
Nikki
policy.
Haley was there at that time.
US foreign policy under the Biden administration. Let's start from where you just left. It is very important to understand, because the overarching consideration of Biden administration is to introduce an element of care, multilateralism, and diplomatic approach rather than unilateralism or isolating or weakening the international institutions. You mentioned United Nations. US left the Paris Treaty. US left WHO. And US was absent in terms of on the world stage in terms of the most important issues. In fact, its own key allies in Eastern Asia, in Western Europe, even Middle East were feeling very insecure and let down by America. So Mr. Biden and his presidency and his team in the State Department is very concerned that they want to repair its alliances, improve its diplomatic multilateral approach, and in that context we should see this a timely afterthought and correction of and clarification of their position on Kashmir. Why? Let me explain it why. It's not a moral obligation. There are three reasons for it. Number one, because US wants to maintain, and let me reiterate it clearly, that US wants to maintain its influence and leverage in South Asia as a crisis manager, as a great power which has the influence and trust of both countries, both India and
Ali,
Pakistan.
historically, when you look at the Democrats, I mean,
Yeah.
primarily what we have witnessed that whenever there was a government of Democrats in the United States of America, their tilt, their inclination was too much towards India. And especially when you talk about of 2021,
Yes,
where
yes.
the Americans think that the two major adversaries,
Yes.
one is China, one is Russia. They are also planning to impose sanctions on Russia. Today there was a story. And when it comes to China, obviously, to contain China, the only option they have left is India. So
that
aren't
is-
they trying to strengthen India to that level where they can challenge China?
Very
So
important.
obviously, Jammu and Kashmir is the major cause. They have to give support to them.
Yeah, no, that's very important because I completely agree with your view that the US leaning towards New Delhi is going to continue. That is an unfortunate reality that we must recognize.
So what about the Jammu and Kashmir case?
Yes, I'm coming to that. But US, there are four interests that US has, but let's prioritize them. US interest is in maintaining the global world order status quo. And that is why they want to use India in contesting and containing Chinese rise. However, what we and our diplomats must warn the new Biden administration that in trying to encourage and build up India, they should not ignore and overlook a greater security concern, which is the US interest in maintaining strategic stability in South Asia and preventing a nuclear war. That is a more important US interest. Averting a war over Kashmir, averting a nuclear crisis in this region is more important to US than containing China, because that can just unrattle the whole international system. More importantly, if you remember, since 1987 there have been 6 crises in which US did play a role in managing, if not resolving it. It was 1987 brass tacks, it was 1990 crisis, it was 1998, it was Kargil, it was standoff, it was Mumbai. US did play a role, although it was not balanced. It was not completely impartial. It was gradually leaning towards India.
Even post 27th February last year.
Absolutely. So this clarification and correction of US stance that Kashmir remains a disputed territory actually supports US own interest in order to be considered by both Islamabad and New Delhi as a crisis manager.
I think the biggest
Because
challenge would be to create an equilibrium between Islamabad and New Delhi. But it seems that their
Yes.
inclination again is towards India.
Yes, yes.
But sir,
That's
if I get back to you,
sure.
sir, Lord Saab, there are more than 500 very important Twitter accounts that have been blocked by the Indian authorities. Now, interestingly, when you talk about that, oh wow, that's great to let these services be open when you talk about 4G. But they have just talked about a certain point, and that happened after 18 months. Can you imagine? And they tweeted about it. But they did not look at the whole picture, sir. They missed out on the people. They have been refrained from the freedom of speech, the right to say whatever they have in their mind. I mean, that right has been snatched away by the Indians, sir, when it comes to the real issues of Jammu and Kashmir, which has been illegally occupied by them. And you talk about the living standards of the people out there. You talk about their businesses, the way they were, crumbled. You talk about the orchards that were cut down by the Indian authorities. Forget about the physical torture given to children and the elderly and the women, and the way they burn their houses and the atrocities they commit on almost daily basis.
There are a number of issues. One is this social media, whether it is Twitter or Facebook, and Indian government as well as Indian trawlers, and also they must have a big department that actually reports people. My Twitter account has been reported to Twitter on a number of occasions when I have tweeted something which they don't like. So there are plenty of examples when I talk about Hindutva and I talk about RSS and their fascist policies. They do it also. Facebook also. If you have a photograph of any of the Kashmiri freedom fighters or anything about Kashmiris right to be able to fight back, then immediately they suspend. Twice, two or three of my accounts have been closed. In fact, my personal account is under another name because with Lord Nazir Ahmed, they made sure that I could never go back on Facebook. I have a page. So they're very active. That's number one. Second, they report. We need to do the same thing. We haven't got this same kind of department or group of people who could liaise and work. I mean, one thing, because of the financial interest of not only countries like the US, it has its own economic interest, but then Twitter and also Facebook have business interests in India. Many other big companies have interests in India. So therefore, they lean towards them, even though they know that this is a fascist government. This RSS is very similar to the Nazis and everything else. We say all that, but they tend to. But I think my friend earlier on was talking about the UN. The UN doesn't really, it doesn't matter how many resolutions, UN resolutions are there. They're important because they are the basis. But really, UN, do you really seriously think that UN has any power or authority over the United States? Donald Trump's days, we saw that the United States was losing that power, because now you've got emerging power, which is China, and of course Russia and China, along with Turkey, Iran, Pakistan. You could see some difference. But Biden government, like you've said before, the Democrats have always been leaning towards India. I think that they will go back to the UN. They will try and control world superpower status, as they've done in the past, and sort of empower. But I think that I'm not so sure why we haven't mentioned Afghanistan. Afghanistan is very important to America, and to have access to Afghanistan and to be successful in Afghanistan, they need to work with Pakistan. But Pakistan is strategically more important. Please don't ignore the importance of Pakistan, whether it is because of the economic or political situation between China and the Muslim world, whether it is because of Afghanistan. America needs Pakistan too. And I think that Pakistani diplomats and also American Pakistanis need to be working in that new administration. I was saddened to see 20 or more Indian origin Americans who are in this administration, and only 2 or 3 Pakistanis. I know that there are many Pakistani Americans who come to Islamabad and they claim that they know everybody, and they've got photographs with many senators and presidential candidates and everything. That you get that, by the way, in America when you are fundraising for them, and they come and talk to you and they just give you support. But I was glad to see that Kamala Harris actually praised a Pakistani who she actually said that she talks to him, gets his advice, even to run as vice president. So there are some Pakistanis. They probably don't come to Islamabad as much as the others, but we need to go and look for those who have influence with this administration, and talk to them, and also brief them and give them latest information on what is happening. You know, I honestly think that this Hindutva government in Delhi is really weak. What they are doing to minorities, what they've done to their own farmers, what they've done to Kashmiris, what they've done in terms of this, in the name of democracy, this fascism that is creeped up in Indian politics. that needs to be exposed. We need to be more open about supporting the Dalits and other minority groups. I'm certainly not afraid of Indian influence anywhere. I think we just need to do a bit more work and expose them with their lies. And
No,
just
but
look
Lord
at
Saab,
just one.
there's a very important point I want you to throw light on, and that is, I'm not doing a comparison here. Kashmir issue is one of the oldest disputes listed in the United Nations, and the UN resolutions they support. Now, the interesting part is that when you talk about the protests going on in India regarding the new farm laws or agricultural laws, as they say, a lot of people have very legitimate concern whether you talk about the farmers of Punjab or Haryana, or you go further down, you talk about Rajasthan and so many other areas. I mean, now they're also protesting. Those issues made headlines all over the globe, sir. Whether you talk about the newspapers or you talk about the television channels, everybody was talking about it. Hardly one man got killed, and that was an accident, and then a couple of them got injured as well, and then there was this protest, and you know, the baton charging and everything made headlines. But sir, when you talk about Kashmir, so many people are being killed on daily basis, so many houses are being torched by the Indian army, so many youngsters, they have been picked up, and God knows about their whereabouts, whether they are alive or they are dead, we do not know. You talk about rape as a tool of aggression to control the masses. You talk about killing of the elderly. You talk about people being picked up and sent to Tihar jail and God knows where else. That is not making headlines, sir. So the Kashmir issue, having more value attached to it, is at the back burner, whereas other important issues, obviously this farmer issue is a very important one, they are being projected. How do you see that discrimination, sir? Lord Saab?
Well, I do, and I agree with you. But you know, the Palestinian issue is very similar. The Rohingya case is very similar, and the Uyghur Muslims issue is very similar. I think we need genuine, real sort of intellectuals who could write report, because at the moment none of the human rights organizations, whether it is Amnesty International, Physicians for Human Rights, Asia Watch, or the or other human rights organizations, other than the Commissioner for Human Rights, who has written 2 or 3 reports which have also been discussed in the European Parliament. We need regular information. And because they've blocked all that information, that needs to come out. And I honestly think that we just need to probably focus in a different way, the way we talk about Kashmir, because it is human rights issue, it is legal issue, but I am not so sure whether we should keep threatening the world that there will be a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. We've been doing that for a long time, and people don't really take that seriously. We need to set a narrative, because look, India does it all the time. They've just, with their fake websites and news websites, they've been exposed by the European organization, which has given literally dozens and dozens of these fake website news. And then we catch another one on 6th of February, this Sunday Guardian report about British parliamentarians being led by Pakistan to talk about Kashmir. Complete nonsense. It doesn't exist. In fact, the writer has categorically said that he did not write this. The photograph and the name of the writer that is advertised on that newspaper said that he did not write that article. So it's the fake news. It's the narrative they've set. I tell you, I remember in the 90s when India and even after 2000, India continuously went with one slogan: cross-border terrorism, and talked about fake cross-border, all these Pakistanis coming over. And then the world they started to think just like British former British Prime Minister who said that if you want to tell a lie, say it enough times so that people start to believe you. And India does that. And but we don't have a narrative, the true narrative, that whether it is exposing Hindutva policies,
I think
RSS,
that's a very, very
fascism.
important point. Now, yeah, but I was just told that Lord Nazir, you have to go somewhere, so we'll let you go. But thank you very much once again for your participation in the show. Coming to you, Kal Sindhu. Now, when we talk about that, there is no change as far as the policy is concerned regarding Kashmir, for that matter. And then at the same time, sir, now there used to be three major, I would say, stakeholders when we talk about Kashmir. That was India, Pakistan, and the Kashmiri people. Now there are four. Let's include the Chinese also. But when it comes to the Indians, Indian government, they believe that this is their internal issue. Forget about the bilateral problem. They totally say they believe that it's a unilateral, it's a problem which is actually not a problem. This is a dispute that has been going on for quite some time, and we'll be able to look after that, and we can take unilateral actions. And this is exactly what they have done when they revoked Article 370 or 35A for that matter. So it seems that, whatever we may say, whatever the other supporters of the Kashmir cause they believe in, at the end of the day, the decision makers, or let me put it this way, the narrative builders, they are in the Western world. You talk about UK, you talk about France, you talk about the United States of America. These are the three major, I would say, members of the United Nations Security Council, and they support the Indians. So if they are supporting the Indians, where are we standing then?
Yeah. No, I have a different opinion. I think that there is a sense of restlessness which is prevailing in the world because of changing of the polarity, because that now US wants to maintain the status quo as a world power and the world leader, controlling the world order, which is right now becoming very difficult for her to maintain that. So to give an impression that this restlessness is, it's not a reality, rather US is still relevant, it will definitely again try to link with both the Pakistan and India in resolving the issue vis-a-vis and in context to Afghanistan also. And plus, you have rightly mentioned that now Kashmir issue is, I would dare to use the word that it has been internationalized in a different way, since China which has minor stakes in the issue, has now much larger and huge stakes in terms of the present or the contemporary situation which they have with India in Ladakh. So Kashmir is actually is gaining the prominence, and it seems that for the first time the world and also the US has come to the conclusion that they have to engage both Pakistan, India, and in a way China to solve and to to have a solution for this problem. And this tweet, for which they have given a correction, it implies the same, that never before they had corrected their utterances, their diplomatic or their statecraft, or their statements from given by their official accounts or from their official mouthpieces so quickly. So this speaks, and this gives an impression that now the complete scenario is changing, and because of the China factor, to which even Russia is also linked because of the proximity in Central Asia, and still Russia is having an influence, a lot of influence to all the Central Asian states, over all the Russian Central Asian states. And again, it is in cahoots with China, vis-a-vis challenging the status quo of USA world order. So I think that there is quite a new development which is coming up, and it is very interesting. And this is the time that what now the question arises that what we should do. We have already tried, since last decades to internationalize the issue. We have tried to create atmospherics in which we try to tell world that this is a legitimate issue and this is the issue which has been there, which is unresolved and which has to be resolved to reach peace and stability. US has time and again proved that it is unable to solve the instability, and it is the influence, vis-a-vis both, once US wants to have an unpartisan approach, that influence is very thin. So a new approach is required by the USA, which I think, to my understanding, they are trying to adopt. You have just mentioned that Kamala Harris has, said that Lord Sabat just mentioned that she said that she get advice and some support from a Pakistani. Kamala Harris even supported and openly supported once Jay Shankar refused to meet a US congressman on the issue that she supported the Kashmiri cause, and that too the clapdown and the crackdown which Indian government is doing on this is just a year ago. So I think they are interesting developments, and we have to show our cards positively. Our foreign office, our the think tanks and the diaspora. Our diaspora in London, in England, is very important. They are already playing their role, as Lord Sabha said. So
Indeed.
I think we have to create a narrativity, and that narrativity should be imbibed both in our state channels and also in our public channels, and should be part of our academia and our think tanks and intellectuals. So we have to revive that policy, the policy of our commitment to the Kashmir cause, which is our regular, as our founding father has already, it has clarified that we have no other option, we have no other solution other than pursuing the cause or the unfinished agenda of the partition.
All right. Thank you so much for your comments, Sindhu Saab. But last quick comment from you, Ali, and that is about, when we talk about the overall status of Kashmir, we mostly refer to the diaspora based in United Kingdom, correct, sir? But the real power lies in the United States. So you talk about the present US ambassador in India is from the Indian origin. You talk about Kamala Harris, the vice president, again from the Indian, and you're talking about 20-25 very influential people who are primarily there to guide the president or the vice president or even the senior officials. Whether we like it or we don't, sir, the Indian position is very strong. You talk about the universities. Most of the department heads or the deans even, they are from the Indian origin. You talk about the books authored and which are taught, whether you talk about economics or otherwise, Indians have written. So the Indian influence, whether we like it or we don't, has a lot of power, sir. And now, talking about what we are doing there. So you talk about the State Department, you talk about the White House, you talk about their media correspondents, all are of Indian origin. That makes the difference, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So what can we do? What do we have to do? Very quickly, because we're running short of time. Number one, I think Pakistani government, our embassy, our foreign office and our scholars should tell the new Biden administration, number one, that Pakistan is not an ally of China against the US interests. We want to be a geo-economic bridge of peace for regional connectivity. We are not becoming a strategic ally against US interests. We want to balance the US-Chinese interests in this region, number one. Number two, very important that gradually there is a segment within the Biden administration, the US establishment, the US intelligence agencies, the US State Department, which recognizes and reads the Indian strategic character and culture accurately, and they do not overestimate Indian utility in counterbalancing China. And there is a sense that the commitment of India against China is not a foregone conclusion and should not be taken for granted. Thirdly, the US interest in maintaining strategic stability in South Asia is more important than counterbalancing China, because China is a world power. But if the strategic stability is destabilized between India and Pakistan, then the entire US interest in Indo-Pacific region in South Asia will go for a 6. Lastly, let me just add one point to what my friend has just said. Interestingly, Kashmir has become more important and relevant today than ever before, because today it has 5 dimensions. Number one, the human dimension, over 100,000 lives lost. The legal dimension, which has been reinforced by the clarification by the State Department that it's an internationally recognized dispute. So how New Delhi will read this Indian statement, it also needs to be understood. Third is the diplomatic aspect, the UN resolutions, and the US and the Chinese will not want Indians, because of their dispute, to become a member of the Security Council. So that is also very important. Strategically, India has twice as many troops deployed in Indian occupied Kashmir than Israel has in its entire armed forces. So how militarized it is. Lastly, CPEC has made AJK a very important geoeconomic
new development, in fact, they're coming
that is
via
not seen
AJK.
in that context. Actually, it's by virtue of CPEC passing through AJK territory and Gilgit-Baltistan, it becomes a very important place, a very important Chinese stake is in peace, security and stability in this region,
All right.
which I'm sure Indians nor the US would like to mess with.
All right. Thank you so much, Ali, for your presence.
Thank you.
And it was a pleasure having you, Colonel Sindhu. Thank you so much for your participation as well. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you, inshallah, on Monday. Till then, you take good care. Have a great weekend. Khuda Hafiz.